Hey folks, welcome back to Trinity Outdoors. Let's take a few minutes to talk about this kayak. Alright, so I figured as I get going with my new channel here, one of the things that I wanted to do fairly early on was kind of do a walk around of the kayak that I primarily use to fish from. So this is a 2024 Wilderness Systems Recon 120. So from the very beginning, I had envisioned this kayak utilizing a trolling motor in some aspect, and I've done some custom work here that we'll go over in just a few minutes, but this is what I'm going to be using for the 2025 season. All right, so let's start out up front. Might mention I've got this little clip right here. This is seriously, it's just a tool clip that you can get from Lowe's or other hardware stores, and I use that to hold my net in place. Normally I keep these latched when I'm out on the water, so it's just a grab as needed. You put it right back in when you're done. It stays up front on the bow of the kayak out of the way. I can grab it quickly from the seat when I catch a fish that is worth retrieving. So if we take a look inside this front compartment, I've got a couple of lithium phosphate ion batteries up here. I've got a 50 amp hour Power Queen, and that is what I use to power the trolling motor. And I have a 12 amp hour watt cycle, and that is what is used to power the two Humminbird fish finders. So I currently have two Humminbird units. I have a Helix 7, and of course it has traditional 2D sonar, down imaging, and side imaging. And then I also have a Helix 5, which is 2D sonar only. So currently, that's what I'm using them, 2D sonar on the Helix 5, side imaging on the Helix 7. At some point soon, I plan to upgrade the Helix 5 to another Helix 7 unit. That way I can run side imaging right and left if I want to. I realize I won't have networking capabilities between the two Helix units, but it will open up some possibilities as far as running graphs on one, side imaging on the other, and etc. that I don't currently have. So to kind of wrap up on the graphs, one other thing I want to mention is this bridge that they're mounted on. That's something that I custom made. It's got two 3.5 or 4 inch length, I can't remember exactly, Delrin spacers that bring right straight off the hull. There were inserts in the hull right there that are threaded, so they've got set screws going into those, then the thread into the risers, and then that's an aluminum plate that I cut. It's kind of custom made. If you see, it kind of contours with the curvature of the hull of the kayak and whatnot. And then of course for wiring, I utilized some of the Wilderness System pass-throughs. Really clean, the wires are all tucked in, there's very minimal wires. Really about the only wires that you even notice are the ones for the transducer. I may try to clean that up with some loom at some point in time, but it's not a big deal to me at this point. So turned out pretty good, and it works really good. They're mounted low enough where I can cast over the top of them. I'm not worried about hitting them with the fishing rod, damaging the screens or anything like that. But they're also high enough that my feet don't get in the way. So if you'll notice right here, I've got a little accessory that's probably throwing some question marks up in some people's minds. I have a shift knob from a 6-speed transmission mounted in my kayak. Now, as much as I would love to brag and say I figured out how to put a 6-speed transmission in the kayak, in reality, this is the mount for my transducers. So with the side imaging transducer, obviously you want that below the hull to get the best possible angles for your side imaging. But that leaves it vulnerable to damage if you're going through shallow water with obstructions, loading and unloading on the trailer if you're putting it in the shop floor like it is right now. So this is a mount that I made that's actually retractable. It has a ball detent in the side of the shaft, and there's a modular block on the bottom of that shaft that has both transducers mounted on it. And you simply push it up and down. It's as simple as that. Now, obviously, once it's in the water, you're going to push it down a little farther than that. That's about as far as it's going to go sitting in the shop floor. but you get the concept anyhow. Works great, super lightweight, and was not difficult for me to build. So I literally just made a block of Delrin right there, put a hole through it that's the size of the shaft material that I was using. It's a piece of fiberglass. Drilled a hole in the block of Delrin, put a ball detent in it. It's got a spring behind it that keeps pressure on it. I cut a little groove in the side of the shaft. I don't know if you'll be able to make that out on the video, but it's got an upper location and a lower location. This also keeps it from twisting, and so it keeps it straight and parallel with the sides of the kayak. A couple of other real quick mentions in this area. I've got a Yak Attack double header. Obviously I'm using that to hold my catch board off to the side, keeps it over there out of the way where I don't hit it with the paddle. In the rare event that I use a paddle with this kayak, but occasionally you get way back up in a creek or something where it's shallow, you got to pull the trolling motor up and a paddle comes in handy. And for paddle storage, I've got a single Yak Attack paddle holder over here. I simply clip it in and the rest of the paddle just kind of lays on top of this part of the kayak up out of the way. While I'm right here, even though it's not kayak specific, this is kind of a cool little crate I'll talk about for just a second. So this is a Cobalt storage crate that I got from Lowe's. And I want to say it was about 20 bucks tax and all. I cut a piece of Lexan for a top. I just used a couple of cheap hinges to attach it on the back. And you could put 5 easily, possibly even 6 3700 size tackle boxes in there. I don't have that many in there right now. I don't carry literally every piece of tackle that I have with me. But there's plenty of room for extra junk in there, which we do end up carrying. A couple of rod holders there. I believe those are Ozark trail rod holders, if I'm not mistaken. Simple little setup. I put them on an angle because I like them leaning away from the kayak a little bit. You get into some tree limbs and stuff, and they seem to tangle up a little bit less if they're leaning back on an angle. So far I'm really happy with that. It is waterproof from the bottom side, so you don't have to worry about water coming up from the scupper holes in the back and getting into your tackle. If you had a shirt or something you wanted to throw in there. Now there are openings on it right in here on both ends, handles essentially, cutouts for the handles. I guess if a fella really wanted to get creative, you could seal that up, make it watertight if you wanted to. I'm not overly concerned about that though. It works pretty good for my needs. Coming back to the PWM, it is your standard PWM that you can get off of eBay or Amazon or any other website. These things are like $10, $12, $14 a piece. I want to say I got the one that was rated for 60 amps maybe. Should be probably pulling somewhere around 35 amps at full draw, something like that. So this one has the capacity to pull the amperage required. And I just made a little bracket, literally slipped it into that piece of plastic right there that holds the back of the seat down. So you can loosen those 2 screws, undo these 2 plugs, and the PWM will come right off. So if you needed to service it, if you needed to take the seat off to get to something underneath, or if you were just doing modifications, or if you're going to go out for the day and you weren't going to take the trolling motor, you can completely remove that. All of the power cables are closed up and sealed at that point. You don't have to worry about anything shorting out. Something else I've been tinkering with, I took off the sacrificial block on the back, the drag block, and I've replaced it with a piece of HDPE and some solid polyurethane casters. I think these were 4-inch casters. Trying to kind of emulate the wheel and the keel from another popular brand of kayak. This thing's heavy, and I use a cart, but there are times where I'm really close to where I plan to launch it, so cart's kind of inconvenient for just the aspect of having to fumble with another piece of hardware. So I put these on here, and even though you might be looking at it and say, well, that's going to slow you down in the water, that's going to create extra drag, it's minimal. I've been out a few times and I can't tell that they're there, paddling or running the trolling motor, either one. I don't think they have a huge impact, but it does make it easier to drag this thing around being 150 plus pounds. and of course the trolling motor, which is probably the part that most of you were the most interested in. So this is a Minn Kota Endura 34, and I literally took this out of the box brand new, cut the shaft in half, threw everything else away, and kept the part that I wanted. Now this mount is something that I made. The plates are made out of 6061 aluminum, and the two centerpieces are made out of marine grade HDPE, and the whole mount itself is made out of a piece of Delrin. So this is removable. I've got a little cable that runs from a carabiner and a bracket mounted on this side of the seat mount, and it runs back through an eyelet up to the trolling motor, the mounting bracket back here. Now the trolling motor, the foot of it's heavy enough, this thing will actually self-deploy. So if I unhook it from the bracket at the seat, it'll literally lower itself down. And then if I need to raise it back up, I just grab that cable and pull it back up and hook it back to that bracket up there at the seat. It's not a bad problem at all to raise and lower. I want to say the entire bracket assembly and the trolling motor and everything weighs about 11 or 12 pounds. So it's not heavy by any means. But that's something that I can take off when I'm going to load or unload the kayak in the truck. You can see that one thumb screw right there. So I can pull that thumb screw out, and this whole assembly will slide out of that base. Makes it really nice. So I've got, two carabiner connections right here for the steering. I've got one right there to raise and lower, and obviously my power supply that I just unplug over there. And this whole thing will slip off real quick and go in the truck. To steer the trolling motor assembly, I've got some fairly inexpensive Sea Dog brand foot pedals here, and they are on tracks where the pedals themselves are adjustable. I've actually done a little bit of trimming to make these shorter. I had concerns about the bracket for the trolling motor pulling that back, that it was going to make these slide back, and pedals being in the way if you wanted to stand up while the trolling motor was in the up position or something like that. But they really only move back about 1.5 inches or 2 inches, so that's not a problem. And I've got everything running into the back, so it's clean. There's nothing obstructed on the front for if you've got shoes or bare feet or anything like that. You don't have to worry about hitting your foot on something that's going to cut you, or snagging your shoes, snagging clothing, or anything like that. And last but certainly not least, probably my favorite modification, if I'm being completely honest, the red and black Eva foam. Now that is some of the cheapest, least expensive foam that you can find on Amazon or eBay. I want to say the 2 rolls that I bought of that stuff was like 40 bucks. Here's the thing with that cheap Eva foam. It'll hold up good if you treat it good, and it will stick if you clean the surface properly prior to putting it on. That's the key to this stuff. You got to clean the surface, and then clean the surface, and then when you think you've got it clean, clean it again. And then before you put the foam on, maybe give it one more consideration of, let's get this stuff clean. And then it'll stick, and it should stick for a long time. As a matter of fact, I hope you get it where you put it, because now it's going to be there forever. Anyhow, this stuff's great. As everybody knows, it cuts down on interior noise. If you're messing around, you accidentally drop something, or in this case with this particular kayak, you've kind of got these little troughs on each side where you can lay a full length 7-foot rod if you want to, and I do keep bait caster on each side. So stealthy obviously is advantageous on the water, so it serves a purpose, and let's be completely honest, it looks pretty cool too. So that kind of wraps up my quick walk around of this kayak. Look, I realize this isn't an Old Town or a Hobie or a Bonafide XTR. I will say they are fairly heavy. I want to say that this kayak's somewhere in the 95-pound range without the seat assembly. And by the time you add the bridge and the 2 graphs, the 2 batteries, the junk, all the junk, this thing is a piece of junk. The storage crates with the rod holders, the trolling motor, all the things that we're going to have, your paddle, obviously your fishing rods, your life jacket, don't forget that part, highly important. I have a safety flag that I put on this. I kind of forgot to mention that earlier, but I do have a flag I put on it. Plan to put some lights on it. It is registered. Since I have a kayak in Tennessee, that is a requirement. All in all, great kayak. I have zero complaints. Like I said, it is heavy, but super stable. I think it's 38 or 39 inches wide. I don't have the specs on it in front of me, but super stable. I stand up in it. It's almost as stable as standing on the concrete here in my shop floor. All right, that's going to do it. I'm not going to ramble on any more about this thing. If you've watched to this point, thank you very much for your time and attention. I greatly appreciate it. Hit that like button for me, and if you don't mind, maybe hit that subscribe button. That's going to continue pushing me and motivating me to do more videos like this. Also, if you have any questions, comments, you want me to elaborate on something else, hit me up in the comments below, and I'll try to do the best I can to answer those questions. Thanks, and God bless.